Happy April, everybody, and this isn't an April Fool's joke. We really are live. First thing we want to do is thank our sponsor, Titebond, for helping to underwrite our live sessions. The other thing we want to do is clear my throat and give you some great news. Hopefully our technology is significantly better tonight. I've talked before about Sam, who's behind the scenes, kind of running the Master of Universe control. But the other Sam, who directs all of my videos, is here in the shop with us tonight. Sam, you want to say anything to the camera, or you want to stay back there and just watch things? What do you want to do?
I can tell you your picture looks a lot better now.
All right, so Sam is here, tech support. We've got a new gizmo connected to the thingamajig, which goes into the who's what's it thing and ends up on the World Wide Interweb. So hopefully our audio and video quality is much better. And I believe Krista's already champing at the bit over there to get some questions out. So let's hit it.
Yeah. John would like to know, how do you know what size horsepower you need for your woodworking shop? Is 2 horsepower enough?
What size horsepower what?
For a dust collector.
Okay.
Is 2 horsepower enough? He would like to get a planer, joiner, and bandsaw. Right now he has a table saw.
It depends. So one of the things would be, are you going to run items at the same time? Are you going to work in the shop with anybody else? So if you are, and a table saw and jointer might be running at the same time, you got to go to a bigger unit so that you can provide enough airflow for that. If it's a onesie-twosie basis, the thing to do is figure out CFM per machine. You can find that information online, how much CFM the unit is providing, and then are you piping it in? Because then that drops your airflow. Or you can get a machine that you roll, a dust collector, that you roll up to each unit. You run it on the table saw. When you're done, you move the dust collector to the joiner. When you're done, you move it to the planer. Because then you're shorter, your run is much shorter. The hose connecting the dust collector to the tool, so you don't need as big a dust collector. So there's too many it depends to say this size will serve you. You got to do the science, you got to do the math, and think about how you're going to use it. Hard pipe or flexible hose, how many machines you're going to run at once. That'll tell you how big a machine you need.
Okay. We have another question from a different John.
Okay.
Okay. He's a beginning woodworker and has turned his single car garage into a shop.
Attaboy, John.
So space is at a premium.
Okay.
He doesn't have any plans on ever cutting a full sheet of plywood. He's wondering if he could forego a table saw for a bandsaw.
Well, sure. If you put a good fence on a bandsaw, you can cut a straight line. Another alternative is a good circular saw. An even better alternative is a track saw, which is a circular saw guided by a track. So yeah, it depends on what you want to do. And bandsaw can serve you very well. One of the most versatile tools in the shop.
Okay, thanks, George. Jamie would like to know, when using butterfly keys, what determines how many to use and how to space them? Also, is there a ratio to how thick they should be compared to the work piece?
Yeah, I'll do the last question first. It's kind of the easiest. I make the thickness of the butterfly. I'm trying to think if any of those pieces, butterfly pieces, are still in here. I think they've all been made into furniture at this point. I make the thickness of the butterfly about 1/3 the thickness of whatever it's being cut into. Now, there's some it depends there. If a crack is really, really significant and you want to make the butterfly thicker so it's got more support, there's nothing wrong with that. As far as size of the butterfly or bow tie, spacing of those parts, there's 1,000 it depends. There's an aesthetic aspect where the aesthetics of how many butterflies I'm going to put out there will affect the look of the piece. What some people will do if they're using multiples, so you can step them down like that. And there's also an it depends, which is how big the crack is. So there's nothing here, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to look at it and you're going to say, I'm going to try a couple of butterflies in this one, or maybe just, the last one I did was a single. The crack was only about 4 inches long, 5 inches long. So it's going to vary person by person and project by project. It's not formulaic.
Okay.
Outside of the thickness.
All right, thanks, George. Michael wants to know, are there twisted or warped billets or boards that are impossible to straighten and square? I had a 3x3 red oak billet that has given me a fit. It was twisted approximately 1/2 inch in 8 feet.
Well, so a 1/2 inch and 8 feet is a pretty significant fit, and I'm going to say Michael, pretty significant twist. Michael may not be from the United States if he's calling the wood a billet, and that's okay. We have a lot of foreign watchers, overseas watchers. Let's do, Krista, let's run maybe a tool, and let's just do a quick once over on the right way to do this thing, the right way to do this flattening, and that might answer part of Michael's question. So I'm going to get you to go toward the jointer here. And when I look at my iPad here, I'm just watching for questions over here on another channel. And I'm going to quick stick my head in my office here with my hearing protection.
Where are we, Sam?
All right. So here's the deal. Any chunk of wood, I guess, can be straightened, and the question is going to be, how much wood are you willing to give up in order to get it straight? So part of the key to this is material needs to be, what are you looking for?
Never mind.
Material needs to be stable. Green, and you try to do what we're about to do, and then it sits, it's probably going to distort after it sits. So it needs to be dry it needs to be as dry as it's going to get. And then here's the right way to do this. If you have a jointer that'll allow you to do it, the first thing we want to do is face joint the material. So I'm going to do that first. Good. What we're looking at here is how to square a board. So you can, if you can come back out. What that first step did is it gave us one flat face, and we need that as a reference face for the next step. So in the perfect world, what you've got is a jointer. You can get this face flat. When we go to the planer, this face, the flat one, is down. We cut material off the top. That'll make the top perfectly parallel to the bottom. Then we come back to the jointer. We joint an edge. Then we rip to width and joint the other edge. So back to Michael's question of, is there wood that can't be made straight? Well, no, because it's just, even with that 1/2 inch twist and 8 feet, we could get that board straight. You're going to cut off a 1/2 inch of wood to make it right, and then plane it to your final thickness. So the important thing out of this, I think, is making sure you're using the wood is stable, and you're using the right tool sequence in order to make it happen.
Okay, thanks, George. I'm going to ask you this one while you're moving, okay?
All right.
All right, so Kurt is building a farmhouse table. He glue and Craig jigged 2x6 together the first couple of days. It stayed nice and flat, but then it started to warp. Is this due to moisture in the wood? What is a good way of avoiding this?
Does he say like what kind of wood, where it came from?
It came from though.
And what was it, like 2x? Was he literally bought 2x? It's not a great idea to buy construction lumber and try to make it into furniture grade projects. And the deal with that is that construction grade stuff isn't dried the same way that we would dry material for a furniture project. So the moisture content of those 2x6s was probably fairly high. Then they came into your shop, they dried a little bit more. That's what caused them to warp like that. The other thing I found with a lot of 1x6, 2x6, 1x4, 2x4, is that they suffer from case hardening, and what that is, they're not dried correctly, and the inside is a different moisture content than the outside. So as soon as you start to machine them, they go all funky because you're releasing all sorts of internal pressure as soon as you start to cut into them. So if the question was how to avoid it, I think was the final question. Don't use construction material to build furniture. If you absolutely must, you got to bring it into your shop. It's got to sit for quite a while so it stabilizes. And then that joiner process I just showed you, to first face joint them, plane them, make sure the boards are dead straight, dead flat, then maybe start working with them for furniture. But if you want to work with pine, if you want to do pine furniture, you can go to a hardwood supplier and you can buy furniture grade pine, and it's way more better. It's way better than the stuff you're going to get at Menards or Home Depot, construction grade stuff.
Okay, thanks, George. For those of you who just joined us, I'm here with George Vondriska, the managing editor of Woodworkers Guild of America. We're here to answer your live questions, so go ahead and type them right below where you're watching this, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and sign up for the free newsletter if you haven't done so already. And we would like to thank Tight Bond, the Pros Advantage, for sponsoring us today. You're welcome. All right, Rick says, I just built a steamer box, but I may have made it a bit too big. 12 inches by 12 inches by 48.
It's pretty big.
Okay. I'm using a wallpaper remover for my steam. I wanted capacity, but a lot that I've seen use ABS or PVC. Will I get enough steam to do the job?
Yo no sé. I've done zero of the kind of steam bending that you're talking about, so I ain't your kind of guy for this. So I have no idea.
Okay. And we do have a question on here from Richard. It's about watching a video about routing, but we need a little bit more information. So Richard, if you're watching, if you could just reply to your comment, and then we'll go back. It's about pre-drilling and mortising. That would be great.
So we just need him to clarify maybe reference the videos, the specific video he's talking about.
Yep. All right, so Anthony wants to know what would be a strong joinery method for 3x4 bamboo plywood top to poplar legs, 3.5 by 1.5.
Well, top to legs, that's no good. So if what we're doing is like this, that's not a good idea. There's no great way to put that together. So hopefully the first thing you're going to do is put rails from leg to leg to leg to leg to leg. And then once the rails are on there, or prior to putting the rails on, bamboo plywood top or bamboo top?
I think it said bamboo top. Hang on, let me see.
Well, I could just qualify the answer.
Okay.
If it's a man-made material, you could use pocket holes in the rails and then use that to fasten the rails to the top. If it's a solid wood, then you need to use tabletop fasteners, and that'll allow a solid wood top to expand and contract independently of the base unit. So on GOA, we've got lots and lots of information about tabletop fasteners. In 45 minutes, and I start posting answers to these questions, I'll source those videos and articles that we have about tabletop fasteners. But man-made material to a leg and rail assembly, pocket holes are a great choice for that.
Okay, thank you, George. We have another viewer who wants to know what is the best way to line a blanket chest with cedar. Do I finish the chest before I attach the cedar, or do I bring the cedar all the way to the top? Thanks a bunch.
I would get cedar spray paint. Wouldn't that be cool? There's $1 million idea. Some chemist can develop that. Do I finish the trunk first? I probably would. In general, it's a good idea that whatever you're doing to one face of a board, you should do to the other. So build the whole trunk, finish the inside, then start lining it with cedar closet lining or whatever you're using. Take the cedar all the way to the top. I don't know. There's an aesthetic there more than a right or wrong. It seems to me it would look a little funky if the chest ended here and the cedar on the inside ended here and there was a step there. I can't picture how that would look. It seems like it'd be a little weird, so I'd be inclined to, yeah, bring the cedar all the way to the top, I think.
Okay. I think Rudolph is asking here for your opinion. It looks like he wants to know Milwaukee dual bevel miter saw 12-inch or Bosch Glide dual bevel miter saw 12-inch for a garage shop. Gonna have a dedicated station for it. Do you have any?
Well, I've got a miter glide. I don't have a Milwaukee, so I haven't. It's decades since I've done a miter saw tool test, so it wouldn't be fair to Milwaukee for me to make a statement. So at GOA, we do some product reviews. We don't do tool tests as a rule. So what I would do is Google and then go from there with that buying advice.
Okay, thanks, George. So we have a viewer who wants to know, is there a difference in joint strength with floating versus fixed tenons?
Well, that's a great question. So a floating tenon would be maybe a domino, or you just create a mortise and make your own floating tenon. So I would say size for size. If the tenon that you produce on the end of a rail to go into a mortise is the same size as a floating tenon, there should be zero strength compromise because you basically got the same thing. So each should be as strong as the other.
All right. Barry would like to know, any thoughts on a 220 versus 110 motor for a SawStop table saw? He's a moderate hobbyist.
Well, 220 is bigger. 220, 221, whatever it takes. I've got a 223 horse on mine, but I'm in the shop kind of all day, every day. So it does get a lot of use. I don't think if you've got a 220 available in your shop, I'd say great idea to go that way. If you got to work real hard to put that in, are fine. I've used them at woodworking shows all over the country. Never had a power problem with them. So I think you'd still be okay. You know, the benefit of a 223 horse here on 110 volts, you're going to be a horse and a half, 15 amp motor. So a smaller motor, but like I said, I've wood or cutting dados or anything like that on the 110 volt system. So honestly, either one would serve you fine.
All right, thanks, George. Jeannie has a question. Looks like Jeannie's finally got some high quality tools and a bit of experience under her belt, but recently she ran into something that she wasn't quite sure how to deal with. It says, I was ripping some nice Sapele?
Sapele is
okay.
Beautiful wood.
I was ripping some nice Sapele for a hexagonal shaft of a music stand. The original stock was jointed and planed square. However, after I ripped each strip to form the 6-sided shaft, each one became curved, making the glue up almost impossible. What went wrong and how can I avoid this?
So this is, boy, tonight is wood instability night. It's this is like question number 3 or 4. So yeah, the material wasn't stable. So it could be that it wasn't very dry. So let me get a visual aid, and I think I know right where it is. So you can do a commercial, Krista.
Okay, well, I'm here with George Vondriska. He's over there. We're here to answer all your live woodworking questions. If you haven't followed us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, do so. WWGOA.com and sign up for the free newsletter. And don't forget, Titebond is our sponsor tonight, and we're very thankful for them.
Good filler. So the thing I went to get is a moisture meter, and these are a great investment for anybody who's going to do woodworking. And the deal is, when I poke it in here, if my battery's not dead, those probes are going into the material. The scale here is telling me then what the moisture content is of this material. So on your Sapele, maybe we would have done this. Let me look, I'm just going to check this one and then do this one. And these have both been in my shop a while. They're very similar in moisture content. Maybe if you metered the Sapele, you would find, oh my gosh, it's not 8 or 10%, it's 20%. which is right away there's a warning sign, this is not ready for me to make into a project. I'm going to say, I'm going to guess more likely this is going to be another case where you have a chunk of wood there that wasn't dried correctly, and as a result, when you cut into it, it released a lot of internal pressure, and when that happened, that's what made it go all kittywampus and kerflooey, or kerflooey and kittywampus, even, I don't know. What could you do? So one thing is, when you're planing material, one thing you can do to protect yourself is make sure that you're planing from both faces. So if I start with something that's 1 inch and I want it to end up 3/4, don't take a 1/4 inch off the top. Take off a 1/16 and another 1/16 and then another 1/16 and then another 1/16. So you're working down toward the center of the material. That'll help keep it more stable. Other than that, you know, like looking at, to just stand at a lumberyard and look at material, there's no good way to tell if it's case hardened and it's going to go kerflooey when you start to cut into it.
Okay, thanks, George. We have a question here from Mark. He is fairly new to bowl turning and getting discouraged as he keeps measuring wrong and going through the bottom of the bowl. Any suggestions?
What would you suggest, Krista? Because you've had this experience, and which was my fault, I'm saying right now.
I would suggest...
Find a different instructor, but don't ask me.
That's exactly what I would not ask George. No, I'm just kidding. I would get that thing, and I'm spacing on the name of it, and check the thickness of my bowl.
It's kind of like the body fat checker.
Yeah, it's right there, right?
No, that's not, you're close, but that's not actually the right one.
Whatever.
But hang on. Hold, please.
That thing right there.
So with this, it's a great benefit, because if you want to see what your body fat content is, you could. But what these are really for is bowl calipers. So whatever I read on this end, when I squeeze it, it's showing me on the opposite end what that wall thickness is. Now, that's great here on the wall, and I get what you're saying is that you're concerned about going through the bottom down here. So you can use these and also come around this way to some extent. Now somewhere in here you're gonna have a faceplate or a chuck or something, so you've got to extrapolate a little bit and figure out, well, if I'm 3/4 of an inch right there, where am I in the smack center of the bowl? And the other thing to get in the habit of is listening as you're making a cut. And the thinner the wood gets, the higher the pitch as you're cutting into it. And once you get that tuned in, your ear will tell you a lot about when to stop. I can show you just so you don't mark, was it, right?
Yep.
So you don't feel bad, Mark. Don't show this. The safety people will go crazy. I'm climbing on a thing to get a thing. Because misery loves company. This is a southern yellow pine bowl made from a 150-year-old beam, and I can see you through it. That didn't happen until I was in the sanding process, and it's still here because I'm trying to figure out some way to fix it.
If you flip it around, they can see the hole better. Yeah, okay.
So it happens, you know, despite using bowl calipers and everything else, I took it too far. So, but bowl calipers, and I can source those when I come back and answer the questions. Bowl calipers are a great addition.
Okay. Anthony would like to know, how do you use a carpenter square to set a bevel gauge to 1/6, I think?
1/6?
Yeah,
like
there you go.
Dovetail slope is maybe what we're
Maybe.
after. Use a carpenter square.
Mm-hmm.
Just get off there. One. Well, I don't know. I mean,
Do we need more information?
no. I'm not sure that this is that these two tools can get us where he wants to go. And I'll just add another tool here. But so I think what he's trying to do is a common dovetail slope is 1/6, and I want that on this tool. This is a sliding T-bevel or a bevel square. So using a framing square can I somehow do this to find that 1 and 6? And, well, I don't know, I almost can. There's 1, there's 6. So if that blade is long enough, and I put that end on the 1, and this end on the 6, where am I? Right there. Right there, I just set that to 1 and 6. Now the downside is, if I'm laying out dovetails, I probably want it like this. So more commonly what I do is just, I came here without a pencil tonight.
There's one right there. Oh, never mind, it's in here.
What I would do is, from this corner, measure over 6, measure up 1, connect the dots with a straight edge, not freehand. And then you can use that to set the bevel square and still have an end projecting out. So it's just a different way to get that slope.
Okay. Richard has a question about dust collection. He's new to the market and he's looking at possibly getting the Laguna P-Flex or the Jet. However, he's not had any complete reviews on the Laguna. Which brand do you believe is better, or do you not recommend either?
I don't know. You need independent research, which isn't me. I mean, I don't have enough experience with either or both to do any kind of fair side-by-side comparison.
All right. So we have a viewer who wants to know, what is your favorite finish for outdoor furniture like Adirondack chairs, and why?
Well, I can tell you what I used to do a lot of was linseed oil and mineral spirits, half and half. And that soaks in really well. You got to be prepared to do that about once a year. It looks great on an Adirondack chair. Very easy to apply. Do multiple thin coats to build it up. More recently, I've switched to using something like Thompson's Water Seal or a similar product. And I like that. I don't know, I like it better. I think it's a little more durable for something that's going to live outside 100% of the time. I think the water seal is going to last longer than linseed oil does. If you're staining something, there's a Australian timber oil, and I can't remember if that's the brand or the thing. Like, does some company make Australian timber oil, or is Australian timber oil the brand? But I've got some planters outside the building that I stained with that stuff years ago, and they of course live outside 100% of the time, and they still look great. So that would be another product to consider. But clear, Thompson's Water Seal, and stained this Australian timber oil.
All right. George, I have a question that I'm not sure if we can answer, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Rich wants to know, why can't I make any box frame I build square? Am I really that bad at woodworking?
No. I
know.
Well, yeah, we need to know a little, we need to
A little more info.
analyze the process a little bit more. Box frame, is it butt joints on the corners? Are you trying to miter the corners? Is it a huge frame? Is it a little frame? Are you cutting them on a miter saw, which I pointed to over here, table saw, which I'm pointing to over there? Make sure your tools are set up square. Parts, the two long sides got to be exactly the same. The two short sides got to be exactly the same. So you got to do procedures that make sure that happens. And then, we kind of need more, like, we need the process described so I can see if I could pick out something in the process that would be an aha moment that said this is why it's bad. Is anybody saying anything like, oh my gosh, is the video better? No comments like that? Wow, Sam, your work here was a waste. Sorry, buddy.
Well, maybe we'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah.
So actually, just going back one to the water seal, right? We have a question from a viewer. Do you like the look of water seal or linseed better? Like linseed and mineral oil.
Yeah, the linseed oil gives a little more amber tone, so the water seal is like clear. It makes the wood look wet, but it doesn't give it that kind of honey color that linseed oil does. So from just a color perspective, I like linseed oil better.
Okay, and Daryl from Brisbane says it's Australian timber oil.
Australia, and that's the company where, that's the
It's
implication
a-
is that's the brand.
It's a Cabot.
Oh, it's a
Cabot
Cabot product. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Cabot, the manufacturer, Australian timber, what did he say? Oil.
Australian timber oil. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Charles wants to know, what is the correct moisture content to start a project, or does that actually vary by wood species?
It doesn't vary by wood, it varies by how the wood was dried. So in broad brush strokes, material that's been only air dried will dry to 12 to 14%, and stuff that's been kiln dried will be around 6 or 8%. And if you think about it, is 12 to 14% okay? Well, sure, look at all the stuff Duncan Fife built 150 years ago, Hepplewhite, all of this beautiful furniture that's today antiques, people are paying bazillions of dollars for. All of that stuff was built with air dried wood. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. Biggest thing really is bringing that stuff into your shop, letting it acclimate to your environment before you're going to start cutting into anything. Here, my lives in the shop maybe as much as a week before I start cutting into it to make sure it has the opportunity to get used to this heated environment. So kiln dried wood 6 to 8%, air dried wood 12 to 14, and higher than 14% you probably shouldn't be working with it yet. It's not dry enough yet.
Okay, people are saying the video is better. So
Is it way more better with my really bad English? Look at it. I'm watching the YouTube thing here. Boy, you're worth your weight in gold, Sam, because the video quality is crazy better.
okay.
Cool.
So
It didn't. Hair filter.
Okay, George Ronald wants to know, how do I check the alignment of my table saw without buying an expensive woodpecker saw gauge?
We head for the table saw. Anything else like here that we could examine, talk about? while
I'm
we're
sure
standing
there
here?
will be more questions.
Okay.
But
I'm going to unplug the saw. And then, Kristen, you're going to need to be kind of toward the walls. You're looking back at the blade this way. Very good. And then, let me.
and just a reminder for everyone watching, George will type out answers to all of your questions. He does sit down and go over every single one of them.
No
So
matter how long it takes.
yep, it can take him a couple hours.
All right, I'm coming with the lowest tech solution to this you've ever seen. Saw's unplugged, that's hugely important. Miter gauge. Raise the blade as high as it will go. Now you got your exercise for the day. Then pick a spot on the blade, it doesn't matter where, but we want it to be the plate of the blade, not a tooth. So I'm going to do an X. And then I need a spring clamp is an okay choice for this, but not a great choice. I think you'll see why in just a second. And this is my high-tech gauging device, 1/4 inch dowel. I just put it in the pencil sharpener and I put a really sharp end on it. And that's so we can get a real distinct read point here. Now, one of the things to pay attention to is that with your miter gauge, let me tighten that. It's got a little left and right wiggle. And that's okay. When I do this test, knowing it's got a little of that, I'm going to push it to the left. And I'm always going to hold it to the left throughout this test. The way we do this is use that X. And are you in tight on this, Kristen? Like here?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Kiss the dowel against the X. And this is where this clamp isn't great for this. The clamp's holding the dowel in place. I'm gonna back it off just a skosh. All right, when I do this, I can just feel the blade is rubbing against the tip of that dowel. Now, the reason we mark it with an X is the X goes to the back, the dowel goes to the back. Make sure you're still to the left of the miter gauge slot, and then do this, and it should feel the same. If you don't feel any drag, then it's opened up on the back, you need to make a correction. If you feel too much drag, it's pinched on the back, you need to make a correction. The way we can check it one step further is, I actually just need, who uses paper? We just need a feeler gauge. So using a piece of paper as a feeler gauge, can I slip paper in between the tip of the dowel and the blade? No. No. So this is great. The thickness of paper is about 3/1000ths of an inch. If the gap is greater than 3/1000ths of an inch, you got to make a correction. So, you just be careful. Do the test a couple times. Don't trick yourself into thinking it's okay and it's not really. You got to be patient, and like I said, do the test a couple times to make sure it really is correct.
All right, thanks, George. How would you use Moxon vise if you have one? Do you have a Moxon vise? M-O-X-O-N?
I heard of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Okay.
I know the name, but benchtop table.
It's just stumped George knife. Is all.
Yep.
All right.
It sounds cool. Whatever it is, it sounds cool.
Right. Chuck says, I noticed you're using a DeWalt planer. Do you use the stock knives or a helical cutter head?
Standard. I've considered, I have not done so yet.
Okay. Gary wants to know,
After it's dry, which is yes is the answer. It takes like a year. Your best bet is install it, let it sit, and whether it's stain or paint, doesn't matter. You gotta wait and make sure it's perfectly dry before you put any finish at all on it.
Okay. So George, Valerie wants to know sliding T-square for, Valerie's got a good comment on here, just kidding, about bowl depth. Looking at Stuart, he can't seem to resaw consistently. His blade seems to deflect a lot as he pushes on the stock. He gets conflicting info about blade drift. The Carter people say a good blade, a tuned saw should not have drift. What do you think? And is drift a real thing?
I think so. So I've got a Laguna bandsaw with a Timberwolf blade on it, and generally I'll check for drift. Probably 9 times out of 10 I don't have to do any drift compensation in the fence. I can just go ahead and make the cut. What concerns me the most about this is when you say the blade seems to deflect under cutting pressure. I think you don't have enough tension on the blade. You have tension deficit, which is a bad problem. So what you can do is if the blade is sharp and you're pushing material and the blade is deflecting, add a little tension. If the teeth are dull, it's going to deflect no matter what, and all bets are off. It's not a tension thing, it's a tooth thing. But I always do a drift check if I'm going to do an important resaw. And like I said, a lot of times I don't have to do any compensation for it, but I would check for it and make sure your blade's properly tensioned and is the right width. You can't resaw 6-inch stock with a 1/4-inch blade. You need a wide enough blade that it's got some spine to it.
Okay. Mike is having trouble with his Leigh D4 dovetail jig when making half-blind dovetails. The pins always seem to be too short. He's having a terrible time adjusting and I'm running short on scrap wood. Any suggestions on videos that would be helpful?
Leigh has got great customer service, and I've got a D4 here. Krista's leaving. She's going all the way to the other end. Bye. She's very good at getting props before I actually need them, so I'm sure that's what she's doing. Pins end up to, what was the deal, Krista? They ended up too short?
Yeah.
Too short. So I feel like once the bit is set, that's the same depth of cut for the tails and the sockets. I would contact Leigh Jig. They've got great customer support, and this could very well be something that they've had come up on the phone 100 times and they're gonna know the answer to. I'm gonna just read this. Sliding T-square for bowl depth. Place foot in bowl, slide T-bar down to top of bowl, sliding T-square. Oh, I get it. Tighten and place foot outside bowl. So, that's a great idea, Valerie, and I can show you maybe a thing. I don't have it right here, and I don't want to waste a lot of time. If we had a bowl, and we used a tool to do this, so I go like this, no, and then I go like this. Is that working for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
This is where the bottom of the bowl is, because I gauge that from here. So that little combination score would be a great way to check that too. I was looking for, I've got a shop-made bowl tool, but I don't want to waste a lot of time looking for it.
All right. So Tom says he built a decorative mantel around his fireplace using poplar and birch plywood. The poplar trim around the fireplace is joined with Craig pocket screws and a minimal amount of glue on the butt joints. He got a slight separation at several of the joints after several fires. Any idea on the cause and how to avoid this in the future?
The heat of the fire made the wood dry more, I'm going to say, and it shrank away from the joints. So that's tough. You're building something over a working fireplace. The wood's going to get warm. The wood's going to dry. I'm back to make sure the wood is in your shop for a while and gets completely stabilized, so that hopefully that won't happen.
Okay, and again, I want to remind everyone that we're here with George Vondriska, Managing Editor of Woodworkers Guild of America. If you don't already do so, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and sign up for the free newsletter at WWGOA.com. And we also want to thank Titebond, today's sponsor for our live feed. And speaking of Titebond glue, Bill wants to know, what is the best glue to use to glue up self-made banding, such as a herringbone pattern?
Standard yellow glue. Yeah, you can throw the yellow glue in there. Been working on that circus trick a long time. Yeah, standard yellow glue is going to be fine for that kind of thing. I'm cruising questions here on YouTube. I'm not ignoring you. Oh, Charlie says the audio is good. Charlie Kasarik is watching. Thank you.
George.
Nick, thank you.
George.
Yes.
How do you tell when a bandsaw blade is tight enough?
What, should we go look at the bandsaw quick?
Yep.
All right. And Andrew Rose, this video is so much better. Good. Good job, Sam and Sam. All right. So.
And I think as a side note, we've answered this before.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to answer it again, but these are all archived. So if you just love woodworking or can't get enough of George, just go watch him again. Hour and hour
You're
and
making
hour.
them throw up in their mouth a little right now.
Maybe.
All right, here's one down and dirty test for bandsaw tension. Are you on the blade? See a little play? Right there.
Yep.
And then, hey, Sam, could you do me a favor as long as you're here? In the top drawer in that little cabinet that's open, there are pencils in there, and just grab me one. So one thing you can do to test tension on your bandsaw with the saw unplugged is gently push on the blade. That's about an 1/8 inch of deflection in 6 inches. That's smurferific. That's great. And then once we have thank you. So stay right where you are, Krista. Draw a line. And then this might be a little bit harder to see, and I'm going to leave this upper guide up a little higher than I normally would just to help you see. Because can't you see? Okay. When I make a cut, what I'm going to look for, I'm going to watch the blade on that pencil line. That's why I made the line. So part of this test is the blade's got to be sharp. You can't see it? Okay, hang on. You gotta love a break on a bandsaw. That is so cool. So what I'm looking for here is if the blade is sharp, I should be able to follow this line. This was me. I was talking and steering at the same time. Here, it cut nice and straight right on the pencil line, and I expect that to continue. If as I cut, the blade is kind of fishtailing back and forth, making it really hard for me to cut a straight line, and the blade is sharp, that's another thing that tells me I don't have enough tension on it.
Okay, thanks.
So the side pressure and a test cut.
Okay, thanks, George. Dave wants to know, he'd like to make cross-cut jig. He needs to cut small pieces to fit into the miter slot on the table saw. But Dave's always reading that he shouldn't cut such narrow pieces on the table saw for fear of kickback. How can I cut them safely? Thank you. One of my all-time favorite table saw jigs. Anything else that doesn't require a visual I can answer while I'm getting ready here? Well, let me look.
Plugging the saw in.
Oh, there are many brands and types of wood glue. How do we make the best decision on what type of glue to use?
Talk to other woodworkers and ask them what they use and if they've had failures. And
you want another one without a visual?
Sure.
Okay, Vic makes wooden cutting boards that are edge laminated. Vic has the opportunity of purchasing either a biscuit cutter or a dowel cutter, which would be the better for using on the boards.
Makes what kind of boards? Sorry.
Wooden cutting boards that are edge laminated.
Edge glued. I wouldn't put anything in there. I would just glue them. Gloop, 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 gloop. If you've got a good glue joint, you don't need a biscuit or a domino or a dowel or anything. I've made, I don't know, bazillions of cutting boards with no I hate to say fasteners, I'm not talking about screws, but no other support in there at all besides the glue joint. Okay, thin pieces on your table saw, easiest jig you'll ever make. You need a piece that's some fixed width. I make it 10 inches because I'm stupid and this makes the math easy. Down on the bottom, there's a foot or a hook right here, and that was 1/4 inch hardboard when it started. Now it's like 1/8 inch hardboard because it's been cut into. Glue that on, don't staple it on because every once in a while you're going to cut into it. Some kind of a handle here. I'll show you a different choice in just a second. So the way that you use this is you set your table saw to 10, that's why I use that number, plus whatever the thickness is that you're trying to produce. I'm setting it at 10 1/8. The jig goes against the fence. Material goes against the jig. Let them travel together. So the benefit to this jig is the guard is in place, the splitting or the anti-kickback pawls are in place, the splitter's in place, and you can very, very, very easily cut thin strips. The other handle option, this is the exact same jig in MDF. Got a more substantial foot on it because it hasn't been used much with a handle on it. The handle just helps you on the return to bring the whole thing back.
Okay.
We have like, what, 5 minutes, right? 10 minutes?
We have like 10 minutes.
Okay, they got to tell us where they're from. Don't forget, people, we want to know where you're watching from. That's always cool.
Okay. Bob says, "Hi George.
Hey, Bob.
I live in Florida and most of my family lives in Wisconsin."
It's kind of like romper room. Was romper room in your neighborhood? These two people are probably too young to remember romper room, but at the very end, it was a really big deal. She'd take out her magic mirror and she'd say, "I see George and I see Kristen." I think she was just randomly saying names, but it felt so good to have your name said by the romper room lady. I digress slightly from woodworking. All right,
Okay.
Fire away.
So, Bob lives in Florida.
Attaboy.
Most of his family lives in Wisconsin.
Good choice.
How do I guard against the differences in climate affecting things that I make down here and ship to my family in Wisconsin?
Good luck. It's tough. Arizona's another one. It's so darn dry in Arizona, and then you ship something to here. So wood is going to expand and contract. What?
There's just everyone's putting in where they're from, which is nice.
Thank you.
It's great.
Because I asked. Good.
I know. Sam, this is a new phenomenon for Sam. He's not been here before.
Yeah, Sam hasn't been here before. This is kind of my thing, Sam. I like to close the show knowing where everybody was watching from. They're over there making fun of me. But it's so easy to do. It's low-hanging fruit, so everybody should make fun of me. What you really have to do is build the thing in such a way that you're allowing it to expand and contract, and you just got to go with it. You're not going to limit the movement, so make sure that solid wood top on a leg and rail assembly, you're using expansion devices like tabletop fasteners to let that move. And
Speaking of movement, Eric wants to know, if you're on your feet all day in your shop, how do you avoid foot fatigue?
my feet. I think, like many of us self-employed woodworking people, my all day it's not uncommon for that to be 10 or 12 hours in here. So, shoes, and I don't wear the same shoes every day. So this is a pair of Merrells I'm in right now. I think they were 110 bucks. And I'll alternate between these and a different pair of shoes. That seems to help me a lot. Other than that, I've got one anti-fatigue mat right here in front of a lot of my tools. I know a lot of woodworkers do that. There's a concrete floor throughout in here, but this is the only mat I have in the place.
Okay. Greg wants to know, he's turning a western red cedar. Okay. What finish does he use that will keep it from turning pink, red to like brown? He wants to be able to buff the vessel or have a high gloss finish.
Well, I don't know. Go ahead.
Would you finish the inside with the same material? I think same finish.
Yeah. I don't know if for cedar, is that an oxidation thing? From oxidation or from UV. Like in the case of cherry, it's related to sunlight. In the case of some woods, it's from being exposed to air. So if you see, so unfortunately, when I've turned cedar bowls, I put on something like Mylan's Turner's finish. It's a shellac-based finish that I like a lot. And they do change color over time, so that finish is not a great answer for you. But yeah, I haven't worked with it enough to try to preserve that color that I have a great answer for you.
Okay, I'm going to read a question and maybe we'll move back this way after I read it.
Okay.
Richard wants to know, if I do a plunge router with several passes through a 2-inch thick piece of hard maple, will the router guide hold the bit in place as I route the hole? The wood is 2-inch thick maple. The hole is 1/2 inch wide and 2 inches long, and I have pre-drilled and mortised the slot.
Yes. If you have a good fence on your router and everything is locked down, well, yeah, the fence should be fine. That's what router fences do. So that should be just fine.
All right, thanks, George. Just a couple more minutes left, so we'll try to get as many questions banged out here as we can, all right? Ooh, Eileen, great suggestions. She says, turn that ruined bowl into a farmhouse-style hanging light shade.
Oh, that's kind of interesting.
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, hang on, I have another one in.
Yeah, I like that. I wonder, it'd be interesting. I wonder if it's pretty thin wall. So I'll take this story one step further. I'm turning and turning and turning, and I had a chisel catch. And like I said, this is a 150-year-old Southern Yellow Pine beam. So I had a chisel catch, and I shattered the rim, and pieces went flying like shrapnel. So I found most of them, and I was missing one or two. But I was running a video camera. So in the end, I ended up taking the SD card out of the camera, watching the footage in slow motion, and I could see what direction the chips went. And that's how I found the last two. So I glued it all back together, and these black lines in here are actually CA glue. So when I went through the bottom, I was very proud of myself salvaging the bowl by finding the pieces. So that really made insult to injury when I went through the bottom. But it is very, very thin walled. So as a light fixture, that could be kind of cool. Could have a little glow to it.
All right. I think real quick, maybe two more.
Okay.
Anthony wants to know, how do you clamp wood that is at different angles? Bar clamps are good for straight things, but how would I clamp pieces at 20 degrees or 30 degrees or whatever?
Well, if you're at 20 degrees, you need to warm up your shop, or the glue on. Clamping angles, there's like a lot of it depends. So I say, Sam, as long as you're here, there's a finished flag case all the way back there by the clamps. And this would be a good visual.
And while we're waiting, we've got lots of viewers from all over the United States, Australia again, Mexico. I don't know if we've had that one before. So.
Thank you. These flag cases are a bear to clamp because they're such a funny shape. So what I do, I want to make sure I don't mess this up now that it's finally done. It only took me a year to make it. This offcut was from this 22.5 degree angle. I glue that with hot glue. I glue that back on, and I glue that back on. Am I in the right direction here? Yes. And when those are hot glued on, I can put a clamp this way to close that joint. So glue blocks like this, that's a great solution to any funky joint you have like that.
All right. I think this will probably be our final question.
The final question.
And there are tons that we didn't get to, guys. Sorry, but George is literally going to go sit in his office and answer yours right after this.
Cry.
So, yeah, he might cry a little, but whatever. So Rafe wants to know, I want to start wood turning. What's the cheapest way to get started to see if I really enjoy it? And are there any classes you know of for turning bowls and such?
Well, there's a bowl turning class in this very building once a month or so. Right where we're standing, we fill this space with 8 lathes, and everybody comes in and makes their own bowls in sort of this style. Everybody turns a bowl kind of like this. So if you're too far from Hammond, Wisconsin for that to be viable for you, check the Rockler stores, the Woodcraft stores. They often offer hands-on turning classes. And really that's the best thing. The cheapest way to start is to pay $100 to go take a hands-on class and see if you like it. Then from there, lathe chisels, respirator and or face mask. Then you can start tooling up. And the benefit too, like the way I do classes here is there are huge stationary lathes that cost thousands of dollars. There are benchtop lathes that cost hundreds of dollars. So in a class, you can use different kinds of chisels. You can use different kinds of lathes. You can get feedback from other turners about so that's a category: cabinet making, furniture making, lathe turning, carving. A class with some water, and see what you think of the whole thing.
Okay, so I think that wraps us up for
Time to
tonight.
say goodbye.
We'll be back again the second Thursday in May
Yep.
at 7 p.m. Central Time, to answer a whole bunch more questions, right? So again, thanks for joining us. If you don't subscribe to the free newsletter, go on out to WWGOA.com and subscribe to that. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And once more, we want to thank Titebond for sponsoring the video tonight. Anything else, George?
If you're in Carbondale, Illinois, I'm going to be down there. No, I just was in Carbondale, sorry. If you're in Champaign, Illinois, I'm going to be down there for a cabinet making class plus some other classes this month. May, weekend with wood, but that's already sold out. June, huge event in Oklahoma. You can check my website for that. That's going to be a really big deal. Video woodworkers. That's going to be a really cool event in Oklahoma. July, AWFS in scenic Las Vegas. Other than that, I think we're done. Krista, great job. Sam here, great job. Sam on the board, great job. We'll see you in May.